Have you ever had that feeling? You just bought something, maybe agreed to do something, and then later this little voice pipes up like, hang on, how did that happen? Was that really me deciding, or was I kind of pushed?
Oh, absolutely. It's incredibly common. And usually it's not about you making a bad call or anything.
Mhm.
It's more that we're wired with these psychological shortcuts. Triggers, you could say. Our brains use them to deal with this absolute flood of information we face every day.
Okay, so shortcuts to help us cope.
Exactly. But the thing is, these shortcuts, the ones that make us efficient, they can also be, well, manipulated, often quite expertly.
And that is precisely what we are diving into today on the Deep Dive. We're really going deep into the world of persuasion.
Mm-hmm.
It's powerful, sometimes, frankly, a bit unsettling.
Mm-hmm.
And our main guide here is Robert Cialdini's, that classic work, Influence, specifically his famous 6 Weapons of Influence.
Right. And our goal today, it isn't just to sort of understand these psychological triggers on an intellectual level, things like reciprocity, scarcity, social proof, all those.
Yeah.
It's really to dig into that critical question. Where does ethical influence stop and cynical manipulation start?
Exactly, because we see these principles used everywhere, don't we?
We do. We'll look at how they get exploited. Think about those sneaky, dark patterns in software design,
Yeah.
or those really high-pressure sales tactics that just feel wrong.
Yeah, they leave you feeling uneasy.
Definitely. And we need to ask about the moral responsibility.
Yeah.
Who's responsible when these powerful tools are misused?
Precisely. What we're really hoping for you listening,
Yeah.
are those aha moments, those insights that help you navigate all this more consciously, maybe more resiliently.
And to help us do that, we've gathered quite a stack of sources. Obviously, Cialdini's influence is central.
Of course.
But we're also pulling in ideas from people like Shoshana Zuboff, Michael Lewis, Stephen Covey, even going back to Machiavelli.
Wow, quite a mix.
Yeah, it gives us the theory, but also let's say, the sometimes harsh realities of how persuasion actually works out there.
Think of this as your shortcut, then, to understanding not just the how of persuasion, but the why and the should we behind it.
Exactly, moving past just definitions into the real implications.
Okay, so let's unpack this foundation first. Before we even get to Cialdini's weapons, why are we even susceptible? It's not just about being gullible. Is it something more fundamental?
Not at all, no. It's actually kind of amazing how efficient our brains are. Yuval Noah Harari talks about this in his book. He says, we humans rely on mental shortcuts because the world just throws impossible amounts of data at us. Ideas, promises, threats. It's overwhelming.
Right, there's just too much to process consciously for every single thing.
Exactly. Our brains they'd probably short circuit if we tried. So these shortcuts aren't laziness. They're essential for survival, really.
Unnecessary coping mechanism. So they're almost like pre-programmed responses.
That's a good way to put it. They're like little automatic scripts. They let us make quick decisions without burning tons of mental energy.
Like hitting the brakes instinctively.
Yeah, or choosing the busy restaurant because, well, if everyone's there, it must be good, right? That's social proof in action.
Okay.
Super efficient for most day-to-day stuff. Avoids getting stuck in analysis paralysis.
Right.
But, and this is the key point,
Yeah.
that efficiency is exactly what makes us open to influence. These shortcuts can be triggered, often without us even noticing, guiding us down a path someone else chose.
Which leads us straight into Cialdini's first big one, commitment and consistency, often called the power of the small step. What's the core idea here? Why is it so effective?
Well, deep down, humans have this really strong need to be consistent, or at least appear consistent, in our beliefs, our attitudes, and crucially, our actions.
Okay.
So once you make a commitment, even a tiny one, say something out loud, do a small favor, you suddenly feel this pressure, both inside yourself and from how you think others see you. You feel this pull to make your future actions line up with that first step. We just really want to feel and seem consistent.
So if I agree to something really minor, like signing a petition, that makes it harder to say no to a bigger related request later, even if I wouldn't have agreed to the big thing initially.
Exactly. Cialdini really emphasizes this in Influence. He talks about these consistency pressures being, well, incredibly powerful and widely studied. He points out that we're generally uncomfortable with our inconsistencies.
Yeah, it feels weird.
It does, and we'll actually work quite hard to reduce that feeling, even if, as Cialdini says, it requires fooling ourselves to do so.
Wow. So we'd rather rationalize a potentially bad decision than admit we were inconsistent.
Often, yes. It's easier on the ego, perhaps. And the book notes this can happen automatically, almost on autopilot. to avoid maybe uncomfortable conclusions if we thought too hard.
Or just to avoid the effort. Like Sir Joshua Reynolds said, thinking can be laborious.
Absolutely. It's often the path of least cognitive resistance. Thinking things through again takes effort. Consistency is easier. And this isn't trivial. Cialdini shows that even relatively minor verbal commitments can lead to much larger behavior changes.
Okay, give us some examples. Where does this actually show up in the real world? Because
Right.
it sounds quite potent.
Oh, it's everywhere once you start looking. Think about buying a car. The salesperson gets you to agree to a small thing first, a test drive, maybe a specific minor option. That little yes starts building momentum towards the big yes of buying the car.
Right, see that.
Or charitable donations. They might ask you first just to put a small sign in your window. Then later they ask for a donation. You're more likely to give because you've already publicly committed in a small way to their cause.
Makes sense.
We see it in voting behavior. Getting people to agree to vote beforehand increases turnout. In-home sales rely on it heavily. Health choices, like sticking to an exercise plan after telling friends. Even Cialdini mentions studies relating it to infidelity patterns. That first small step just sets the stage for bigger ones.
And this is where it gets really intense and maybe gives a critical edge to understanding this principle. Influence talks about its use in psychological indoctrination programs during the Korean War. That's a whole different level.
It's a really stark example, yeah. The book explains how widespread collaboration among American POWs wasn't always down to, torture or immediate betrayal. Often, it started incredibly small.
How small?
Things like asking prisoners to sign petitions that seemed fairly innocuous, like a statement saying America is not perfect, or making a very mild criticism of the U.S. government, things many might privately agree with to some extent.
Okay, things that don't feel like outright treason.
Exactly. But once a prisoner signed that or wrote it down, they'd made a small, active commitment. Then the consistency principle kicks in. The pressure, both internal and external, starts mounting to align future actions with that initial stance.
So it escalates.
Gradually, yes. Those small steps could lead to writing essays with more criticism, participating in discussion groups, eventually providing useful information, or even making false confessions. They were, in a sense, unknowingly helping the enemy, driven partly by this powerful need to remain consistent with their earlier, seemingly harmless actions.
That's genuinely chilling. It's not a sudden break, but this slow, incremental slide, driven by a basic human psychological principle, really shows the subtle power.
It really does. And it highlights why being aware of even small requests, small commitments, is so important. Saying yes can set you on a path you didn't intend.
Okay, let's move to the next one. Reciprocity. This feels maybe a bit more familiar to people, that feeling you have to return a favor.
It definitely feels intuitive. Reciprocity is, well, it's fundamental to human society, isn't it?
Yeah.
We feel this deep, almost automatic obligation to give back when someone gives us something, a favor, a gift, even a concession in a negotiation.
It's like a social rule.
It is. It's the glue that allows for cooperation and exchange. When someone does something for us, we feel indebted and we want to clear that debt.
And businesses are obviously all over this one. You mentioned a source. Do you want to keep your customers forever? How does that illustrate it?
Yeah, it gives a great example. It talks about companies persuading customers to share information about themselves. How? By offering something valuable first, like a gift or a discount.
Yep.
The Walden Books example is classic. They offered a 10% discount to become a preferred reader. All you had to do is give them your info. Now, this starts what they call a learning relationship.
But it also triggers reciprocity, right?
Exactly. Got the discount, the gift. Now you feel the subtle pull, maybe unconscious, to give something back. In this case, your valuable personal data.
So it's not just the 10% saving, it's the psychological feeling of obligation. The company uses that gift to get the data and start building that relationship where you feel you kind of owe them.
Smart. Very smart and very effective. It bypasses the direct ask, which might get a no, lead with the gift, trigger the obligation. People are way more likely to share info or engage more if they feel they've already received something. It's like a psychological Trojan horse.
Okay, next up, scarcity. The allure of the limited. We see this everywhere, don't we? Limited time only. Only 2 left. Exclusive access. What's the psychology here? Why does limited mean better in our heads?
The core idea is super simple but really powerful. Opportunities just seem more valuable when there are fewer of them. That fear of missing out FOMO, it's a massive motivator.
Right.
When something's scarce, we automatically tend to think it's higher quality, more desirable, more special, almost regardless of its actual worth. It flips an urgency switch in our brain.
And this isn't just for consumer goods, right? It works even on sophisticated players, like investors. There was that point in blitzscaling.
Oh yeah, that's a fantastic insight. It highlights this almost paradoxical investor psychology. The book says, investors always prefer to give their money to someone who doesn't need it.
Which sounds crazy, right?
It does, but think about it. Hearing a startup say, we don't need to raise any money, triggers, as they put it, a positive Pavlovian response in venture capitalists.
Why? Because it makes the opportunity seem scarce.
Exactly. If they don't desperately need your money, it implies they have other options, lots of interest. So the chance for you to invest suddenly seems more valuable, more exclusive, more limited. You'd better get in now.
That is brilliant, turning neediness on its head to create desirability through perceived scarcity.
Wow. And it's not just VCs. That other source, Finance and Technical Change, talks about how new entrepreneurs, maybe with a breakthrough tech, can get funding they might not have gotten earlier. Why? Partly because the opportunity itself is perceived as scarce and groundbreaking. Investors don't want to miss the boat on the next big thing.
So it's the perception of rarity, not necessarily the actual rarity, that jacks up the perceived value, makes us want to act fast. Our brains play tricks on us.
That's pretty much it. If it's scarce, must be good, must act now. Logic often goes out the window.
Okay, let's bundle the next two. Social proof and authority. They seem related. We follow the crowd and we follow the experts. Basically, if lots of people are doing it or someone credible says so, it must be okay. It's like outsourcing our thinking.
That's a great way to put it, outsourcing our thinking. Social proof is hugely powerful, especially when we're uncertain. Instead of figuring everything out ourselves, we look at what others are doing. If the herd is moving one way, we tend to follow.
Safety in numbers, maybe.
Kind of, yeah. And authority is like social proof on steroids. If someone we see as an expert, a leader, someone successful tells us something is good or true, we're even more likely to just accept it. We grant them credibility, often without much scrutiny.
And Liar's Poker gives this incredibly vivid picture of this at Salomon Brothers back in the day, right? The sheer pull of working there.
Oh, absolutely. The book paints this picture of the almost magnetic attraction of the huge salaries and the immense prestige. Salon was seen as the most profitable firm in the world. That success, that social validation, being part of that winning crowd was irresistible to ambitious people.
Everyone wanted in.
And then you had figures like Michael Milken, who, as the book says, drowned his people in money. This created this intense, almost cult-like loyalty. Success breeds success, or at least the perception of it. People saw others getting incredibly rich and just assumed that was the right way, the best way. Powerful social proof.
If they're all doing it and getting rich, it must be right. I need to be part of that. But sometimes that crowd, even a super smart crowd, can be massively wrong. The Big Short makes that terrifyingly clear with the housing market crash.
Yes, The Big Short is the essential counter-narrative here. It points out the closer you were to the market, the harder it was to perceive its folly.
Wow.
It shows how being immersed in a system, surrounded by everyone else benefiting from it or just going along with it, can blind you to fundamental flaws. The sheer number of people involved, all seemingly successful, created this incredibly powerful, but ultimately false social proof that just swept doubts aside.
It's like Howard Marks says in one of our other sources, the most important thing illuminated. Just because everyone's doing it doesn't mean it's right. In fact, being part of the herd should be a reason for worry.
Exactly. Sometimes the smartest thing is to step back from the crowd.
And it's fascinating, maybe a bit worrying, how this kind of authority is shifting now. We're looking less to human experts sometimes and more to algorithms.
That's a huge point from Sapiens and Homo Deus. Harari argues we're increasingly relinquishing authority to external algorithms, partly because we cannot deal with the deluge of data.
So algorithms are the new authority figures.
In many ways, yes. Think about it. We trust algorithms to pick our movies, our music, our news feeds, even our routes home. Why? Because we believe they process more data than we can. They become the ultimate experts, and their recommendations act as this powerful digital social proof, if the algorithm says so.
Okay, and back to human experts. That Enron example from the smartest guys in the room is just a textbook case of misplaced trust and authority, isn't it?
It's a tragic classic. You had respected analysts like Carol Cole at Prudential talking up Enron's impressive story. It's sheer technical excellence. They raise price targets. Merrill Lynch called it a new economy stock.
These are big names, credible institutions.
Exactly. Their authority, their endorsement massively swayed investors and public perception, even though, as we now know, it was all built on lies and incredibly shaky foundations. It just shows how easily we defer to perceived authority, sometimes completely ignoring warning signs if the expert says it's okay.
Okay, so we've got Cialdini's principles, these powerful psychological levers. We understand roughly how they work, but now we need to face the darker side of this. When does influence cross that line into manipulation? When are our own mental shortcuts, our cognitive biases, actively used against us?
This is where it gets really critical to pay attention. Shoshana Zuboff, in The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, talks about something she calls instrumentarian power. It's a new kind of power, she argues.
Instrumentarian power, what does that mean?
It's about using technology, data, and algorithms not just to predict our behavior, but to subtly shape it, to nudge it. She says it substitutes machines for social relations, substitution of certainty for society.
So it creates this environment where we're guided, steered, maybe without even realizing it, using data.
Precisely. It leverages all this data collected about us to create environments where certain choices are easier, more prominent, feel more certain, often without our explicit consent or full awareness. It's less about persuasion through argument, more about engineering outcomes.
That sounds disturbingly close to what Harari described as censorship by flood. Not blocking info, but drowning us in it.
It's a very similar mechanism, yes. Harari says 21st century censorship often works by flooding people with irrelevant information. We literally don't know what to pay attention to.
So we get distracted debating side issues.
Exactly. Or we just become confused and passive. This overload deliberately exploits our limited attention spans, our cognitive limits. It makes it incredibly hard to see clearly, to know what's true, what's important, or what's designed to manipulate us. It's manipulation via noise.
And this links directly to dark data, right? The stuff collected about us that we don't even know exists.
Yes. Zuboff uses dark data as a term for this massive behavioral surplus, the trails of data we leave online, often collected quietly, without our full understanding. Think about IBM investing heavily in the Internet of Things, the challenge of gathering and making sense of all this unstructured data.
So companies are actively trying to capture this hidden data.
Immense effort goes into capturing and analyzing this dark data. Why? To build those predictive models, to fuel that instrumentarian power, ultimately for profit, often with little regard for our actual autonomy or privacy.
Which brings us right to dark patterns in design. These aren't just theoretical. We probably bump into them all the time online without even noticing. What are they exactly?
You're right, they are everywhere. Dark patterns are basically tricky user interface designs. They're specifically crafted to nudge or trick you into doing things you didn't intend to do, like signing up for something, sharing more data, or making it really hard to cancel a subscription.
Like those pre-check boxes you have to untick.
Oh, yeah.
Or the maze you have to navigate to unsubscribe.
Exactly. Thaler and Sunstein in Nudge talk about how defaults exploit our inertia, our lack of salience. We don't realize we have a choice. And sludge, making opting out difficult or costly.
They argue that for defaults like automatic retirement plan enrollment, you need really clear notifications so people know they can opt out.
But dark patterns do the opposite. They deliberately obscure the choices, hide the opt-out, make the preferred path frictionless, and the undesired path a total pain.
It's design deception.
Pretty much. And Zuboff argues Google's whole model, maximizing revenue by predicting who'll click an ad based on analyzing our behavioral surplus, is essentially a giant, sophisticated, dark pattern system. User data is leveraged for profit, not necessarily for the user's benefit. It's built on this hidden layer of behavioral analysis and prediction.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly to more, maybe old school manipulation. High pressure sales and outright deception. Still incredibly common, especially where big money's involved.
Absolutely. And the financial crisis gave us some truly stark examples. Michael Lewis in The Big Short just nails the mindset with that Steve Eisman quote, "Wall Street didn't give a shit what it sold."
That's brutal.
It is, but it reveals this culture where the ethics, the actual consequences of the products being pushed, like those toxic mortgages, were just irrelevant compared to making the next buck. The moral compass was just gone.
And in Liar's Poker, Lewis also wrote about how honesty about the quality of our merchandise was trading at a discount. Honesty was actually a bad thing.
That's the chilling implication. Traders felt pressure to sell bonds they knew were garbage, bonds they believed were doomed. It wasn't just a few bad apples. It was systemic. The pressure to hit targets to get bonuses just overrode basic ethical considerations. The system itself incentivized dishonesty.
And then you get to the level of outright fraud, like with the CDOs in The Big Short. That wasn't just spin, it was deliberate misrepresentation.
Yeah. The character Charlie in the book just couldn't believe it. These complex products, stuffed with risky mortgages, rated triple B or worse, were being stamped triple A by the rating agencies. He called it fucking crazy. That's fraud. And it was. A deliberate exploitation of trust on a massive scale.
It makes you think back to Machiavelli, doesn't it? The Prince. Is that the ultimate playbook for this kind of cold, calculated manipulation?
Machiavelli provides some deeply unsettling historical parallels. His account of Alvarado da Fermo, it's chilling. This guy uses fake friendliness, wiles, as Machiavelli puts it, to conceal his mind. He invites his rivals to a banquet, pretends it's all friendly, then has them all slaughtered.
Pure manipulation for power.
Absolutely. And Machiavelli even suggests a wise prince might deliberately make citizens dependent on him and the state so they will always find them faithful. Not through earning loyalty, but by engineering need. It's a long-term strategy of control through dependency.
Actively making people need you so you can control them.
Wow. Which leads us to more overt forms of control. Coercion and intimidation, especially in leadership. This isn't subtle anymore, it's force.
Right, and it's not just historical. We see versions of it even today. The Everything Store, the book about Amazon, recounts Jeff Bezos allegedly calling an executive a complete fucking idiot and asking why he hired such idiots.
That's intense.
It's aggressive, intimidating communication. It's coercive. It aims to enforce compliance through fear, not through reason or inspiration. Even if the target can, compartmentalize it, the message is clear. Fall in line. Or else.
And turning goals into results mentions executives literally threatening to fire salespeople if they don't smile and act friendly, forcing the behavior. Exactly. It's using raw power to get superficial compliance. You might get the smile, but as Stephen Covey points out, it creates a low-trust climate. It damages morale, kills initiative. You can force the action, but you can't force the feeling.
And for maybe the ultimate example of just raw, unbending coercion, there's Robert Moses from The Power Broker. He seems legendary for just steamrolling opposition.
Moses was in a league of his own. Kara describes his unusual, in some ways unique personality and his relentless use of power. There's the story of him refusing to stop demolition crews, even when the mayor ordered him to, saying only force would stop Moses.
He just wouldn't back down.
Never. He used steam shovels to literally block access to a yacht club he wanted gone, ignoring court orders, making it absolutely clear he wouldn't be restrained by a judge. It's an extreme example of just bending everyone and everything to your will through sheer force and intimidation, completely bypassing persuasion. #tag the erosion of trust and moral responsibility.
So when these tactics, the subtle manipulation or the outright coercion, become common, what's the bigger impact? It can't just be about one bad interaction, right? It must damage something larger.
Oh, absolutely. It fundamentally erodes trust, not just between two people, but across entire organizations, even society. Stephen Covey nails this in The 7 Habits. He warns that trying to, buy a better culture with speeches or mergers while using manipulative tactics underneath, it just ignores the low-trust climate that manipulation creates.
So quick fixes through manipulation don't last.
They're unsustainable. You can't force real trust, real morale, real quality. It has to be built on integrity. Manipulation might give you a short-term bump, but it poisons the well for the long term.
Kind of like that doom loop idea from Good to Great, where bad decisions, maybe driven by short-term manipulative thinking, lead to a downward spiral.
Exactly. Misguided acquisitions, leaders who abandon core values, may be driven by unethical persuasion tactics. It can absolutely trap a company in that doom loop. It shows how short-term wins achieved unethically can destroy the foundation for long-term, genuine success.
And Covey had that other really interesting concept linked to low trust. Malicious obedience. What was that about?
It's brilliant. He observed train conductors in Britain who were, in his words, maliciously obedient. In a low-trust situation, they followed every single rule and procedure exactly to the letter, even when it was completely inefficient or nonsensical.
So work to rule almost.
But with a passive-aggressive edge, it wasn't about doing a good job. It was about following the flawed rules so perfectly that the whole system ground to a halt. It's what happens when people feel manipulated or untrusted. They stop using initiative, stop problem-solving, and just follow instructions blindly, even if it causes chaos. It paralyzes things.
Wow. That really shows how critical trust is for anything to actually function well.
Hmm,
Are there bigger systemic problems that allow this manipulation to happen, maybe without much accountability?
definitely. There are structural issues. John Brooks in Business Ventures talked about the self-perpetuating oligarchy in some corporations. Power rests with directors and managers, and sometimes the actual owners, the stockholders, are too indifferent or numerous to provide real oversight.
So a small group can run things without strong checks and balances.
It creates a vulnerability, yeah,
Yeah.
where ethical lines can get blurred without much consequence.
And the 2008 financial crisis seemed to expose a massive systemic issue with accountability, right?
Yeah.
Thinking back to The Big Short.
That bailout problem, Steve Eisman's frustration really captured it. These powerful financiers were totally discredited, would have lost their jobs without government help, yet they ended up using that same government help to get even richer.
It raises huge questions about moral hazard.
Massive questions. Who pays the price when manipulation causes a collapse? How can the system end up rewarding the manipulators? It showed a system where the gains from risky, potentially manipulative behavior were private, but the losses were devastatingly public.
A perverse incentive structure. And we see concentrations of power happening in new tech sectors, too, which
Yeah.
could enable similar problems.
Yes, that's a point from the technological revolution in financial services. Platform ecosystems, while having benefits, tend towards oligopoly or even monopoly. Early movers consolidate power.
Which makes it easier for them to potentially dictate terms, maybe use manipulative practices.
If that power concentration isn't checked, yes, it can make it harder for smaller players or consumers to push back. It can create an environment where the dominant players can blur ethical lines more easily.
So it's the systems, too, not just individuals. But what about individual responsibility within these systems? Can you just say, the system made me do it?
That's the crucial internal question. The narrator in Liar's Poker really struggles with this. He feels dishonest, even though the prevailing rule was caveat emptor, buyer beware. He had the tools to fight back, the Machiavellian resources, but still felt that internal conflict.
So even if the system permits it, there's a personal moral cost.
Exactly. It underscores that personal toll, that ethical burden of participating, even passively, in systems you feel are wrong. Your conscience still knows.
Which loops back beautifully to Covey's warning about numbing higher sensibilities. That feels so relevant today.
It's incredibly powerful. Covey draws that parallel. Just like junk food ruins an athlete's body, things like constant exposure to cynicism, maybe crude media can breed an inner darkness. It can numb our deeper sense of right and wrong.
And we replace true conscience with just worrying about getting caught.
That's his fear. Substituting that social conscience of, will I be found out, for the natural or divine conscience of what is truly right and wrong. It's a profound call to protect your inner integrity, your own moral compass, regardless of what the world around you seems to allow.
That inner compass is key, and that connects directly to character and leadership, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The 21 irrefutable laws of leadership is blunt. Leaders without inner strength, without consistency of character, just can't be relied upon. It states flatly. Character makes trust possible, and trust makes leadership possible.
Trust is the foundation.
It is. They use Billy Graham as an example of someone whose unwavering character built immense trust. Not forced compliance, but genuine followership based on perceived integrity.
And finally, being honest with ourselves, self-awareness seems essential for making ethical choices.
Without doubt. What makes a leader stresses that leaders need a candid assessment of capabilities, their own and those of others. If you can be honest about your own strengths and weaknesses, your own biases,
Then you're better equipped to assess situations ethically.
yes. Self-aware people, the book argues, are better suited to run organizations ethically. That self-awareness helps you spot your own blind spots, resist manipulation yourself, and hopefully avoid leading others down an unethical path. It starts with knowing yourself.
Okay, so we've seen the power of these persuasive tools and the real dangers when they turn into manipulation. Given all this, how do we as individuals, maybe in our organizations, navigate this? How do we build up our defenses against being manipulated without becoming totally cynical?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? A huge part of it has to be cultivating really sharp critical thinking and deep self-awareness. Harari's point from Sapiens and Homo Deus is so key here. Today, having power means knowing what to ignore.
So power isn't about having more information, but filtering better.
Exactly. It's a radical idea. In this flood of information, the real skill is discerning what's irrelevant, what's misleading, what's trying to manipulate you, and consciously tuning it out, actively choosing where your attention goes.
That takes effort. And part of that has to be questioning assumptions, especially the ones everyone seems to share.
Absolutely critical. That study of Chicago bankers mentioned in Strategic Flexibility showed that people in the same industry don't necessarily see things the same way.
Hmm.
The map is not the territory. We have to constantly question the collective wisdom,
Don't just follow the herd.
right? And Howard Marks drives this home too. Being part of the herd should be a reason for worry. Real insight, real resilience often means taking that uncomfortable, contrarian stance. It requires guts to challenge the social proof or the perceived authority when it just feels off.
Yeah, it definitely takes courage. And then knowing our own weaknesses, our blind spots, through self-assessment.
Foundational. The effective executive talks about doing a systematic decision review. Looking back honestly at what worked, what didn't, why, helps you see your biases, where you lack knowledge. That kind of rigorous self-awareness is maybe your best defense against having your buttons pushed, recognizing when you might be vulnerable to a specific technique.
So know thyself, basically. And beyond our own heads, what about relationships? Does building trust act as a buffer against manipulation?
Huge buffer, both personally and organizationally. Managing oneself makes that profound statement. Organizations are no longer built on force, but on trust. That requires a different way of interacting.
How so?
It means genuinely trying to understand one another, taking responsibility for relationships. When interactions are built on real trust and open communication, manipulation just doesn't find fertile ground. People are engaged, collaborating honestly, not just complying superficially.
And this plays out in how we try to influence others, too, right? Covey's ethos, pathos, logos thing seems vital here for doing it ethically.
Oh, it's the blueprint for ethical influence. Covey says, start with ethos, your character, your integrity. People have to trust you first. Then pathos, connect on an emotional level, understand their perspective, build the relationship. Only then does logos, the logic, the data, the argument, really land effectively.
So many people jump straight to the logic.
Exactly. And it falls flat or feels manipulative because the trust and relationship aren't there. Ethical influence starts with who you are and how you connect.
And in negotiations, that win-win or no deal approach, Covey advocates it sounds like a powerful defense against being pressured into a bad deal.
It's incredibly powerful. It fundamentally says if we can't find a solution that works well for both of us, we just shouldn't do the deal. It prioritizes mutual benefit and fairness over just winning. That mindset automatically counters tactics designed for one-sided gain. You value the relationship and equity more than the victory.
Integrity in the deal itself. And finally, just basic truthfulness and transparency seem like non-negotiables.
Absolutely. Blue Ocean Strategy points out something simple but profound. Even a marketing tagline has to be truthful, or customers will lose trust and interest. Honesty builds lasting trust. Deception, even subtle, destroys it. It applies everywhere.
Even in giving feedback, there's an ethical way.
Yes. The new 1-minute manager talks about separating the behavior from the person's worth. Criticize the action, not the individual. Focus on the specifics without attacking them personally. That encourages growth, learning, without defensiveness. It builds people up, which is the opposite of manipulation.
And that innovator's dilemma idea, it feels like a good metaphor here, too. Even smart people making seemingly rational decisions can fail if they're misled, maybe by customers, or just ignore changing realities. It implies even good intentions aren't enough if you aren't really discerning and honest with yourself.
That's a great connection. You can have good intentions but still be manipulated or manipulate yourself through bias if you aren't constantly questioning, seeking truth, and willing to challenge your own assumptions.
Which brings us back to Howard Marks again, and that need to sometimes stand apart from the crowd.
Yes, his point that being part of the herd should worry you. Real insight, real resilience against manipulation often requires that contrarian, challenging, and uncomfortable position. It takes strength of character to trust your own analysis, your own ethical compass, even when the social proof or authority is pushing you the other way. Hashtag tag outro.
Wow. Okay, that was quite a journey, diving deep into all of that. We've seen how persuasion is, it's a fundamental part of how we interact, but it really does sit on a knife edge, doesn't it?
It really does. Cialdini's principles, commitment, reciprocity, scarcity, social proof, authority, they're brilliant insights. They explain so much about our own behavior.
But as we've explored, it's just so easy for those same principles to be twisted, used cynically. From those sneaky dark patterns online, the exploitation of our biases, right through to those aggressive sales tactics that just erode trust. The line gets very blurry.
Sometimes deliberately blurry, unfortunately. It seems like true power today in this overwhelming information age isn't just about having the data. It really might be about knowing what to ignore, as Harari says.
And that warning from Covey really sticks with you, doesn't it?
Yeah.
About potentially developing an inner darkness if our main concern is just, will I get caught? Instead of what's actually right.
It's a profound challenge. So, the question for you, listening, as you navigate your day with all the information, all the attempts to influence you, what steps will you take? How will you sharpen that internal compass?
How will you cultivate that critical awareness to push back against manipulation, subtle or not so subtle? How do you make sure your choices are really yours, driven by your own values and understanding, not by someone else's hidden agenda?
It's something that requires ongoing vigilance, for sure.
Absolutely. Well, that's a powerful thought to end on. Thanks so much for joining us on the deep dive. We hope this conversation leaves you feeling not just more informed, but maybe a bit more resilient in navigating this complex world of influence.